So we're now going to look at inserting an elastic waistband, but using a quartering method instead. So it's a slightly different technique to the channel, although we still need to make the channel itself. So what I've got in front of me is a garment where I've constructed the waistband and the side seams. And what I need to do is I'm going to fold the seam allowance of the underside. Now I'm going to just reduce it ever so slightly by a couple of mil, just to give myself a little bit of flexibility, and I'm going to press that into position. And it is quite important you've got a nice clean line in which to work with when it comes to this method. Okay, so you may remember from previous videos that we need to reduce the amount of elastic in the waistband to about 70% of the circumference of the waistband itself. So I have already measured this, and the waistband is sitting at about 56 centimeters. It's a nice dizzy one. And I need to, like I did before, take about 5 centimeters in overlap so that I can attach the elastic together. So I need to take 70% of 56, which is about 41, and then I'm going to add 5 centimeters. So I'm going to cut this right down to about 46 centimeters. So I've cut the elastic and I've sewn the ends together with a box and a cross. It's not the neatest, but it'll be absolutely fine because no one's going to see it. So a couple of things to note is that, one, it's really important to make sure that your elastic isn't twisted at all, because that will be very irritating. And I think we've probably all had trousers or skirts that have had elastic waistbands that are twisted. And the second thing to note is that we are attaching the elastic prior to inserting it into the waistband itself, because we're using an ever so slightly different method. So now we've done that, we've got to spend some time marking up our fabric. So I'm going to take a friction pen, and I'm going to fold my elastic, and I'm going to mark the halfway points, and then I'm going to mark the quarter points, and this is why it's called quartering. And then I'm probably going to mark between each one of those points. I'll end up with a significant amount of marking on here, which will really help me when it comes to the pinning stage. So I'll do that. I'm then going to repeat the same task around the waistband. So if you can see, you've got your 2 side seams, so there will be your halfway points. You're going to find your center points, center front and back, which will be your quarter points, and then you need to find the bits in between. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so this bit is a little bit complicated. So I mark my elastic on the right side, and I'm just going to turn it inside out. I'm then going to open up this seam allowance. So what the aim of this next step is to line up all of your markings, but you're only doing it, you're lining up the bottom of the elastic with that pressed edge of the seam allowance. So you're not going inside it, you're going on it. So I'm going to start at the side seam, and I'm going to lay where the elastic bottom bit matches up that bit there, and that's the side seam and that's the marker, and I'm going to place a pin in that. I'm then going to go to the opposite side and find the opposite mark and place that up against that seam allowance fold. Okay, so that's the seam allowance and that's the marker. Okay, now I'm going to continue around, but you'll notice that there is more fabric than there is elastic, so it does get a little bit trickier. This is why having a few more marks is easier than just going with the quartering. So I'm going to pin this into position, and I'm going to line up all of those marks, because actually whatever happens, we want to make sure that when you come to sew this, those marks are completely aligned, and that will give you a really beautiful finish. So I'll go and do that, and I'll take it to the sewing machine. Right, so now I'm at the sewing machine. So I've set my sewing machine to do a long zigzag stitch, but it's also very narrow. So I've got my stitch width at about 1.5 and my stitch length at about 4. So I've now placed it on the needle in between that seam allowance. It's right in the center of that seam allowance, and we're going to focus on stitching between the pins, so here to here. So I'm gently going to pull the elastic so that it is sitting flat. I'm not overstretching it and I'm not understretching it. I'm just pulling it until this has come flat against that surface, and I'm going to support the back ever so slightly. But what you've got to be very mindful of is that you do not want to pull too far this way, because you may end up skipping stitches and pulling it off the feed dogs, and similarly you don't want to end up pulling it through that way. So it's a real balancing act, this. So I'm just going to essentially tack this into position. I'm going just between the pins. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to remove the pin. I'm going to move the whole garment around, and I'm going to go again. And I'll keep doing this until I've gone all the way around. So here we go, that's now been basted on, and it's looking really lovely actually. The consistency of this is beautiful. So we've got one last task, and that is to turn the whole thing over into the waistband and to then top stitch it into position. So I'm going to start with the side seams, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold this over, and then if I show you from the inside actually, so that's going to get folded over against this line here, and then we're going to fold it over again, and we're going to make sure that the this edge here is covering the stitching line from when we inserted the front waistband. So we want that to be over, otherwise nothing will catch when we come to top stitch it. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to place a pin in on the right side, because we'll be top stitching from the right side, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. And this is the easy bit. It's when you end up needing to go into sort of the middle bits, it gets a little trickier, but I'm going to show you a couple of tips. So I'm just going to make sure that's covering up that stitching line, which it is. I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to place a pin in that. Okay, so now that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully, so I don't end up pinning myself, just going to pull that elastic to help start distributing it nice and evenly. Okay, and I'm going to try and find the center point, which is about there, and I'm going to make sure that at that point it is sitting nicely. Okay, now once we've done our sort of anchor pins, what we can do is actually utilize the throat plate of the sewing machine to help us pin everything else into position. So I'm just going to do that back bit there, making sure that everything's nicely distributed, and then I'll show you how we do that. So I'm going to place this on to the throat, and I'm actually going to also place the presser foot down because that's an extra bit of tension on the fabric. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull it just as we did before. We're going to make sure that it's nice and flat and we haven't got any excess fabric sitting above here. We're also going to make sure that this waistband is sitting on top of the waistband on the underside so that we're catching it all in. So once we're happy with that, I'm going to place a couple of these rather clever quilters clips in place just to secure that down, and then I'm going to place a pin in just to make sure that underlay doesn't move, and I'll move on and I'll keep doing this until I go all the way around. Okay, so that's the very last one in and secured. So the next thing I need to do is run a top stitch all the way around this to secure the whole lot in. So I'm going to use a standard running stitch for this. I'm just going to place the needle into the machine, and I'm going to take it really slowly, and just as before I'm going to be sewing sort of in little stages just to make sure that everything stays nice and flat. Okay, so that's now all been sewn in nice and neatly. So the last thing to do is to again pull that elastic and help with that lovely distribution, and this is the finished product. Now I do really like doing it this way because you end up with a really secure elastic waistband, and you don't end up with any risk of it twisting. So this is a lovely way to do it, and it's using the quartering method.